Coming up on Arirang News, U.S. President Joe Biden on his first day in office signs more than a dozen executive orders undoing many of the Trump administration's key policies. One of the orders is to require masks at all federal buildings, and another has the U.S. staying in the WHO. The South Korean government announces a big increase in subsidies for electric and hydrogen cars. For hydrogen models, up to $34,000 in support for those who buy new. And South Korea continues to see fewer cases of COVID-19, around 400 today. There's still a ban in place, though, on gatherings of more than 4 people. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. Joe Biden, now President of the United States, signed more than a dozen executive orders on his first day in office. Some of those were aimed at fighting COVID-19, but he's also overturned many Trump administration policies on climate change, immigration, and America's withdrawal from the WHO. Kim Do-yeon has the details.
And the first order I'm going to be signing here relates to COVID, and it's requiring, as I said all along, where I have authority, mandating masks be worn, social distancing be kept on federal property, on interstate commerce, etc.
This is one of 15 executive orders President Joe Biden signed in his first few hours in office. Modern presidents have signed only one executive order, if any at all, on their first day. Many of Biden's orders reverse steps taken by the Trump administration. Biden canceled America's withdrawal from the World Health Organization, rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement, and defunded the wall on the border with Mexico, to name a few. On top of the executive orders, he's asking agencies to extend moratoriums on evictions and on federal student loan payments for those who've been affected economically by COVID-19. Biden's White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, reiterated the priorities in her first press briefing.
We have prioritized getting our national security team in place, given the crisis we're facing, given the importance of keeping the American people safe at this time.
While the briefing was being held, the Senate confirmed Avril Haines as Director of National Intelligence, the first post in Biden's cabinet to be confirmed. She passed in a vote of 84-10. In the meantime, Biden held a virtual swearing-in ceremony for his appointees.
And you're working with the most decent government in the world. And we have to restore the soul of this country, and I'm counting on all of you to be part of that. And it's not hyperbole.
It has been reported that additional executive orders are in the pipeline in the next few days to tackle COVID-19 and provide economic relief. Also coming next week is a policy dubbed Buy American, which would require the U.S. government to purchase goods and services from U.S. companies. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in has sent a letter to U.S. President Joe Biden congratulating him on his inauguration and expressing hope for a strengthening of the Seoul-Washington alliance. In the letter sent Thursday, Moon said that Biden will be able to achieve unity and prosperity in America. Moon added that South Korea will work together with and continue to coordinate with the Biden administration to boost the bilateral alliance and to achieve regional peace and prosperity. He also expressed hopes of meeting Biden in person in the near future to build trust and discuss matters of mutual interest. The most recent wave of COVID-19 in South Korea continues to subside. On Thursday, there were another 401 cases, a slight decline from the day before. Of those, 380 were locally transmitted, mostly in the greater Seoul area, and the others were from overseas. Cases continue to come from health care centers, religious facilities, and private cram schools. To date, the total number of cases is nearly 74,000. 16 more fatalities were reported, raising the death toll to over 1,316. South Korea's delivery workers have called off a planned strike next week after reaching a final agreement with their employers on better working conditions. The agreement was mediated by the Transport Ministry and stipulates that logistics companies themselves, not the drivers, are the ones responsible for sorting parcels, which means they have to pay extra if the drivers have to do it. In their complaint, the drivers said parcel sorting had them overworked. The deal also requires companies to hire more workers to eliminate the need for deliveries after 9 p.m., and it limits work to 60 hours a week. Last year, 19 delivery workers died from what was reported to be overwork. Those who buy electric or hydrogen-powered cars this year will be able to get some major financial support from the South Korean government. In a plan announced today, more than 30,000 charging stations for electric cars are going to be set up across the country. Baeun-ji reports.
The South Korean government will expand subsidies for eco-friendly vehicles as part of its plan to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. The Ministry of Economy and Finance announced on Thursday that up to $17,000 will be provided to those buying electric cars this year, and up to $34,000 for hydrogen-powered vehicles. Larger subsidies will be given for vehicles which are more energy efficient. In terms of electric and hybrid cars, the Kona by Hyundai Motors and Niro from Kia Motors will be eligible the most financial support. And in order to increase sales of low-priced models, cars priced at over 90 million Korean won or $82,000 will not be able to receive state support. The South Korean government also plans to increase the supply of eco-friendly cars. This includes 121,000 more electric cars, up 21% from last year's plan, and 15,000 hydrogen-powered cars, almost 50% more than in 2020. To achieve this, the country has allocated $930 million for electric cars and $330 million for hydrogen cars. And more than 31,000 electric car charging stations and 54 stations for hydrogen cars will be installed across the country. The government plans to go green on public transport as well and aims to have 1,000 more electric buses and 180 hydrogen buses on the roads. Electric taxis will also be getting additional subsidies of $1,800, along with its original support of up to $16,000. Baeun-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea's exports in the first 20 days of January were up more than 10% from a year earlier on growing global trade volume and demand for wireless tech. According to the Korea Customs Service, exports amounted to $28.2 billion an on-year increase of 10.6%. By sector, semiconductor shipments rose by almost 12% and automobiles by nearly 16%. Exports of telecommunication devices rose the most at 60.5%. There was a decline in shipments of petroleum products of more than 45%, partly due to low oil prices. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-won, professor of economics at Ewha Women's University. Professor Kim, good afternoon. Thanks for coming on.
Good afternoon, Devin.
Well, now that Joe Biden is president of the United States, we're going to start to see his economic policies take shape. Some are already talking about Bidenomics. It's not quite clear yet what that means, but it seems that under his policies, we can look forward to an increase in Korea's exports and economic growth. So, Professor, tell us what you can about Biden's policies and what you see happening on that front.
U.S. President Biden's new economic policy provides a mixed economic environment to Korean economy in real terms. First of all, President Biden will implement massive physical expansion and multilateral trade partnership like a TPP. It is a good news to Korean economy because Korean export to U.S. and other countries increases. Also, in yesterday's confirmation hearing on Treasury Secretary nominee Janet Yellen, she made it clear that U.S. government does not intervene money market, even though U.S. dollar appreciates further. This is another good news to Korean export. But Biden's people unanimously sounded a hawkish note on China, calling it by most important strategic competitor. So U.S. sanction on China will be continued in Biden's administration. This can be a barrier to Korea's export, indirect export to U.S. through China.
And let's talk more about that. You say that the Biden administration is going to keep up the pressure on China, and of course South Korea, for one, depends on China for a great deal of its trade, about 25%. So Korea will be inevitably affected, as you say, by the tensions between those two powers. What does Korea need to do in this situation?
China's export to U.S. will be limited under Mr. Biden's administration because it is highly expected that Biden's government will try to control Beijing with more sophisticated and well-organized measures compared to Trump's administration. This means that Korean export, particularly intermediate goods export to China, is also limited due to this situation. So even though it takes a longer time, Korea should be expanding its export opportunities in ASEAN region and South American region. This approach also coincides with President Moon's new Southern policy, which promotes economic relations with ASEAN member countries.
Right, that has already been a major part of South Korean government policy. Now, turning to the stock market, Wall Street overnight saw big gains with Joe Biden's inauguration. All three main indices rising to new highs. What's the story in the global markets?
U.S. market is rising quickly the day before yesterday with new president's inauguration and hopes on U.S. economic recovery. Dow Jones industry increased by 0.8%, and NASDAQ also increased by 2% in yesterday's market. This positive market wave spread out to all other markets in Asia and Europe. So Tokyo's Nikkei increased by 0.8%, and London's FTSE also increased by 0.4% yesterday.
Korean stocks today getting a boost as well, and coming off of a big rise the day before as well. So what's happening in the local market?
Domestic market had a great rise today too. This rise is also, I think, affected by U.S. markets movements. Kospi increased by 1.5%, and Kosdaq also gained by 0.4% today. In both of Kospi and Kosdaq markets, domestic investors of individuals and institutions sold stocks, but foreign investors bought Korean stocks.
Well, let's zoom out and look at a macro issue here. Economists at the Bank of Korea have studied the country's trend rate of economic growth, that is, its sustainable rate of economic growth. And for the last decade, the 2010s, they found that it fell to the 2% range because of declining productivity and investment. Back in the 1980s, it was around, in the boom years, it was around 8%. Tell us more about that and what you think the prospects are for a recovery.
The downtrend of per capita real GDP or income is something well known to many economists from early 2000s. It represents Korean economy's declining labor productivity and international competitiveness. Actually, until 1980s, Korean per capita GDP growth used to be 7.7%, but that became 2% level from 2010. This problem is related to quite a few structural factors like out-of-dated industry structure, like we are too much focusing on manufacturing and not efficient social and economic system. There are not many things we can do about this in the short run, but in the long run, we need to pursue industry reconstruction as President Moon's Korean New Deal policy suggests.
All right, Professor, got that loud and clear. We'll have to leave it there for today, though. Thanks so much for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.